Hello everyone, the 2026 Formula 2 season is right around the corner, and that means only one thing. It's time for us to make our seasonally wild predictions for the new season. I'm your host, Aaron Harper, and with me to share their insight ahead of the new campaign, Formula 2 journalist Martin Lloyd. If you're wondering what's happened to Fraser, he started a new job, which means he's no longer able to be part of the podcast. That said, he's going to be diving straight into the comments section to roast our predictions and our analysis across the season. Martin, back for another year on the pod. Good to have you back. What are you looking forward to most about 2026?
Well, there's a few things, but I think the main thing I'm really looking forward to seeing is the new drivers that aren't just coming up from Formula 3 and from the Formula Regional level series, but we've got a couple of professional level drivers with huge pedigree in Colton Herta and Nico Verone that are both coming into the series. I think that's going to be really exciting for everyone to watch, to see drivers of that caliber in Formula 2.
Excellent. Let's get into it then. We've got 7 different topics to predict, and we're going to start with our strongest driver pairing. We've got a few predictions from Discord, the Inside F2 Discord channel. If you want to come and join it, I'm sure there's a link in the description for you to just click and you'll be straight into the heart of the action. Come and join us in the community. We always get involved in the chat during race weekends. Salvatore, GMR89 and Julian have all picked Invicta as their strongest lineup, while Ilviar and Grumpy Gamer, both of them couldn't decide between the reigning champs or Rodin. Martin, who's your strongest lineup?
Well, I'd agree that based on past form, those would be the two I'd be looking at choosing between, and I've actually gone for Rodin. They've got the driver who finished 5th in Formula 2 last year and the driver that finished 5th in Formula 3, Alex Dunn and Martin Stenchon. I think both of them looked really, really strong in F2 at points last year. Of course, Stenchon coming in for the last 3 races. I think Alex Dunn in particular, everyone by now knows his quality. He has had a pretty stellar junior record in terms of coming second in Italian F4, second in GB3, but most importantly for me, he was by the eye test, not necessarily results, but by the eye test, he was the fastest driver in Formula 2 last season. He couldn't quite put it together with consistency, some factors inside his control, such as instance in Monaco, for example, and Bahrain. Some factors outside his control, like the disqualification at Spa. I think if the stars align a bit more for Dunn, and if he can have a bit more control in that driving style, in that racecraft this year, he can be a real talent. I also think Martin Stenchon, coming up from a couple of solid seasons in F3, he showed exactly what he could do when he burst onto the scene in Baku last year, although he retired from both those races, but he looked about as quick as any Trident driver had looked in the whole of last year. He didn't quite put it together as he'd have liked in his couple of rounds for Rodin, but I'm not going to let that cloud our judgment. And I think he's a really strong driver. So I think those two McLaren juniors, two former McLaren juniors, I should say, are going to come together and really put together a stronger showing for Rodin in the team's championship than they had last year.
I couldn't concur more with your assessment of Martinez Stenchon. He left a lasting impression despite failing to finish both those races in Baku at the back end of last season. For me, I've gone for Invicta. I just think they backed up their 2024 title win brilliantly in 2025 with a pairing that at the start of the season I don't think many people would have picked as a potential title winning pairing. This year, you've got the reigning F3 champ who won dominantly, and you've got a proven race winner in Josh Dirksen, who's ready to take the step forward in Formula 2 and fight at the front on a regular basis, and did some really, really strong stuff with AIX towards the end of last season. I just can't look far past them, but I think Rodin, on paper, should give them a real run for their money. Let's move to our next topic then, the driver to watch out for this season. Obviously, Martin, you've mentioned a couple of drivers who are coming in who we should be definitely keeping an eye on in terms of their performances. Grumpy Gamer has mentioned one of them and said Colton Herta, as well as Nicholas Solov. Julian has also picked the Bulgarian Solov. Ilviar will be keeping an eye on Mari Boyer. And Salvatore says watch out for Roman Belimski. GMR89 will be keeping an eye on Rafael Kamara. So for me, I think the driver to watch is Colton Herta, coming across from IndyCar, where he's won races, competed at the highest level in the Indianapolis 500. He just brings a wealth of experience. I cannot wait to see how that transforms to a Formula 2 car and his potential drive towards a Formula 1 seat with Cadillac. I just think it is the story to let out for, because there's so much going on here, not only with Herta and his history of trying to get into Formula One, but now his affiliation with Cadillac and the journey that they've had in getting into Formula One. Yeah, it's such a fascinating story. Martin, do you agree with that, or have you chosen somebody different?
I have gone with someone different. As I said earlier, do not disagree by any means that Herta will be very, very interesting to watch. But I've actually gone with someone who's mentioned a lot from what I can remember in last year's prediction video, and that's Gabriele Mini. I think that Mini had a lot of tough luck last year, and he was in a team in Prema that has had its off-track issues and that really struggled on the track last year as well. And I think that in a new environment outside of that Premier environment in which he's been in a team that has repeatedly challenged for titles in the last few Formula 2 seasons at MP Motorsport. I think that's an environment where Gabriele Mini can really thrive. We know his quality, and he actually put together a few consistent runs of scoring last season towards the lower end of the top 10. He got a couple of podiums, including one in the feature race in Abu Dhabi right at the end of last season. We know what quality he has. That's why so many people picked him to be the champion last season. I think people might have written him off after such a difficult first season in Formula 2, but I wouldn't be doing that quite so quickly. And I think Gabriele Mini, potentially leading that MP team in place of Richard Verschoor, could be one who could maybe surprise a few in terms of the performance level in that new team that he's able to bring.
If Gabriele Mini starts doing a lot of winning with MP, I certainly won't be surprised, because I completely agree with you. That speed is definitely there, and it just wasn't shown for whatever reason in 2025. Let's move on to our next topic, and it is about winning. Who is going to be our first new winner? GMR 89 thinks Gabriele Mini will be our first new winner. Of course, he didn't take a victory in 2025. LVR, Grumpy Gamer, and Julian have all picked the F3 champion Rafael Kamara. Grumpy Gamer also suggested Nicolas Solov. Salvatore thinks it will be Mari Boyer. I think it's going to be Nicolas Solov who's going to be taking the victory first as our first new winner in 2026. We know how chaotic sprint races can be. Obviously, Melbourne is a street track. There could be a lot of carnage. You've got drivers getting up to speed. If you nail the setup and have a good weekend, you can really take advantage of it. And then the second round is Bahrain, and we know how crazy that can be with the tire wear and the strategy. So it's quite open to start with, because they're two very different circuits that really opens the opportunities up for new winners. Martin, who is going to be our first new winner in 2026?
I've gone with someone who finished on the podium for the first time at the back end of last season, and that's Nicolas Solov. I think that he's a driver who has got, again, very good pedigree coming up from Formula 3, and is a driver who is in a team in Campos who really quite often qualify in the top 10, whether it be the top end of the top 10 or the lower end of the top 10. They've got a real habit of getting in there in some way, shape or form. Pepe Marti last year in that Campos car made a real habit of taking sprint race victories, and where he was qualifying towards that lower end of the top 10 quite often, that he was often in quite a good position to take advantage of that on Saturdays. Nicolas Solov, I believe, finished third in the sprint in Abu Dhabi at the back end of last year, and I think that I'd be really surprised if he didn't quite quickly do something similar to what Pepe Marti did in terms of bringing that baseline pace of the Campos, and maybe not be quite at the front of the grid straight away, but certainly in a sprint race, perhaps in a track where it's more difficult to overtake, he could definitely be able to take that first new win.
Sticking with the theme of winning, who is going to be our most winning driver in 2026? The driver who wins the most races. Salvatore thinks it will be Nicolas Solov. Ilviar and Julian think it will be Rafael Kamara. GRMar89 thinks it will be Kamara's teammate, Josh Dirksen, while Grumpy Gamer has gone with Kamara or Alex done. Martin, who's going to be on the top step most often this year?
I'm going to go with someone who won a hell of a lot last year as well, someone who I've already mentioned on this podcast, and that's Alex Dunn. I think there's a combination of factors that make him my favourite for this category almost. I think the first is something that I've mentioned earlier on. That's his raw speed that he has. That means he can just completely dominate a weekend if the conditions are right for him, and if the car package is there, he can run away with weekends. I also think that there's certain tracks that he all Rodin seem to have an advantage at. So, for example, in Bahrain in 2024, Zayn Maloney was completely unstoppable, and Alex Dunn won the feature race in just his second or third F2 weekend. Uh, it was quite an incredible performance. It was winning by quite a long way, 8 seconds, I think, but it showed the strength of the Rodin package on that circuit where they tested so much. At Spa, he was half a second clear in qualifying, 4/10 perhaps, and that was a solid advantage over the whole session. I think more than any other driver that we've seen in F2, that's an experienced driver, he's got the quality to really put a gap between himself and the rest of the field. I think he can do that probably again at 3 or 4 rounds this season, doing something similar to what he did last year. So I would go with Alex Dunn.
I've gone with Alex Dunn as well. I just think, like you say, he's so quick. He was, like you mentioned earlier, to the eyeball, the fastest driver in 2025. And I just think he's going to be that year older, that year more mature, that year more experienced to navigate some of the potential pitfalls of chasing down a victory. Because if you think of the Bahrain sprint race, he could have won that one as well and made a clean sweep of that weekend. But things got a little bit messy and it didn't quite come off. But he put that right later on in the season. And yeah, I think he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest driver. And I think he's among the top 2 or 3 best overtakers that we've seen in this category that are coming back for this year. Right, let's get to the juicy topics then. Teams champions, obviously. Invicta have won the last 2 years in a row. They're going for an unprecedented 3rd straight teams championship, which has never been done in Formula 2 history. But Julian, Ilviar, GMR89, and Salvatore all think Invicta are going to make it a hat trick of teams championships. But Grumpy Gamer has gone for Rodin. Obviously, these are the 2 teams that were mentioned earlier as our strongest driver lineups. So, Martin, who have you got as your team champions?
Well, I think it's perhaps quite an easy answer to go for, but I have gone for Invicta Racing. I think it might take them a little while to get going at the start of the year, to get Josh Dirksen used to the new racing environment, to get Rafael Kamara used to the new car, the new championship, the differences between F2 and F3. But as we've seen with both Leonardo Fornaroli and Gabriel Bortoleto, once that click happens, it happened with Bortoleto in Austria, happened with Fornaroli a couple of rounds later, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to stop Invicta Racing. I think the partnership that they've got, while I don't think it's quite as quick as Rodin's on paper, I think that the experience that they've got in Josh Dirksen, in knowing how to win races at this level and knowing how to put a really strong weekend together, and then just a raw talent of Rafael Kamara, I think with the car package that they've got that is perhaps better than Rodin's, or at least has been over the last couple of years in terms of consistency, I think that's going to be very, very difficult to stop. So teams champions, I've gone with Invicta Racing.
I've also gone for Invicta. I think they have shown over the last couple of years they got the best handle on this new. It's not so new now, is it? This current F2 car. Previously, obviously, we saw ART and Prema really nailing the older spec car that they were using, but now it appears to be Invicta and Campos and Hitech and Rodin who are getting the most out of this machine. And Invicta over the last couple of years, with 2 different driver pairings, have shown that they can get the job done across a variety of circuits as well. So they'll be uber confident about this season, and I think they will be very difficult to stop. But I think there's a few teams out there that if things sort of fall right for them and they have good momentum, they could make it really, really difficult at different points of the season for James Robinson's team. Right. The big question, I suppose, is always who's going to be the drivers' champion. As much as we love all the teams in Formula 2, the drivers' championship is where the real juicy action is at. So we've got 3 people from Discord picking Rafael Camara to follow Gabriel Bortoleto and Leonardo Fornaroli in going back to back and winning the Formula 2 title as the Formula 3 champion. Grumpy Gamer has said that Alex Dunn will be our champion this season. GMR89 says it will be Josh Dirksen. I'll kick this one off. I've gone with Alex Dunn. The Irishman, as I mentioned earlier, is probably possible, well, definitely among the fastest drivers on the grid this season. And last year, he appeared to be the fastest. Things outside of his control really got in his way towards the end of the season, but he learned from a few mistakes in the first half of the year. I just think, like I said earlier, that 1 year wiser, that 1 year more experienced, he can put that all to good use. And there's a possibility now, more of a possibility of a Formula One seat, depending on where he ends up with his driver academy, which I'm not sure has been announced yet, but we believe it's going to be Alpine. So that's a revolving door in the second seat there alongside Gasly. So there's an opportunity perhaps to go in at Alpine, which is upwardly mobile. So that will be really motivating him as well. I just think Alex Dunn is the safe bet at the moment for the championship. And Martin, coming to you, who have you got to be the drivers' champion of 2026?
Well, before I say my answer, I do want to say I think there's a lot of contenders. There's Dunn, like you mentioned. There's Stenchon, who I think will be up there. I think Dino Bogdanovic is someone who might be a little bit underrated this year in a very strong Dams team. I think Gabriele Mini, as I mentioned earlier, and we can't forget about Colton Herta, who has proven he's a supreme driver at this level. And when he can adjust, I think he's going to be excellent. But the driver I have gone for is Rafael Camara. I really can't look past the package that Invicta has, combined with a driver of such clear talent that he has. He stormed to the Formula 3 title last year. It was very, very, very impressive, beating Nikola Solov by such a huge margin of 42 points, I think it was, which, given the fact that Solov only scored 124 points himself, I believe, is a huge result. And I just think if he can put something similar together this year, in a longer season in F2, he's got more time to adjust. I would be really surprised if there wasn't some kind of mid to late season run that really took the championship away from the other contenders, just in terms of his quality, but also, as I said earlier, the way that Invicta can work. It's just got they've just got the ability to be the best team, to have the best package with a rather good driver in the number one car. So I've gone for Rafa Camara.
Absolutely. That is who we have picked as drivers' champions. We want to know in the comments who you think is going to win the 2026 Formula 2 title. Get in the comments. Tell us who you think. That is 6 of our 7 prediction topics. And the final one might just be the spiciest one of the lot. It's time for a bold prediction from everybody. I'll go through the Discord suggestions first. Salvatore says VAR's Nicholas Verone will finish above Colton Herta in the championship. Grumpy Gamer says Verone will win 2 races. GMR89 says Colton Herta will be at the front and win by mid-season. LVR is tipping Mariboya for a title challenge. And Julien says Oliver Goethe will win more races at MP Motorsport than Gabriele Mini. Martin, what's your bold prediction for 2026?
I'm going to go along a similar theme-ish to some of those Discord comments that we had. And I think that Vanama Sport Racing are going to have a pretty strong year. There were some really positive signs, especially results-wise, from Rafael Villagomez's side of the garage last year with his first 2 podiums in the series, with A few really strong feature race results towards the back end of the year as well. 4th at Monza, 7th at Baku, 6th in Abu Dhabi. And it's something that we haven't seen too much from Raphael and from Van Amersfoort, but it just gives me a little bit of confidence that he might have turned a corner with this car. Combine that with a driver of the pedigree of Nicolas Varenne. He's got 2 Le Mans wins. He's a really, really strong driver. I think there's a bit of a question in terms of how do you adapt from being the professional World Endurance Championship into the sports car environment. How do you adapt from that into Formula 2 and the different conditions, the different regulations, the different styles of driving, the different ways in which drivers compete? I think that could go one of two ways, but I certainly think that Rafael Villagomez might be on an upward trajectory. And if they can pair that with some strong form on Verone's side of the garage, we know that Van Amersfoort can win races at this level. They did previously with Enzo Fittipaldi. They did previously with Richard Verschoor. I think that they might be on for a better season than they had last year when they finished 11th in the standings, 10th in the standings, sorry.
So my bold prediction, and I said earlier, and Martin, you said as well, that Alex Dunn was, to the eye, the fastest driver in 2025. And so my bold prediction is about pole positions, where it's all about being the fastest driver, but I've not picked Alex Dunn. I've picked Gabriele Mini because I think that speed is there. Last year, he just, for whatever reason, wasn't able to show it at Prema, and I just think that the young Italian is mighty fast. And I just think, I mean, he showed it in Australia. He took pole position before getting the grid penalty for a race that never happened in the end. And that was really as good as it got for him until towards the end of the season. I just think if he's able to put himself on pole position or at the sharp end of the grid more often than not, we'll see the real Gabriele Mini that we know from his time in Formula 3, the one that pushed Leo Fornaroli so close to the title. Yeah, I think he's going to score the most pole positions this season, which will obviously get him a couple of championship points in the process. So maybe that's the catalyst for a springboard into title contention. So that is what we think. As I said, we want to hear from you guys in the comments. Tell us who you think is going to win the F2 title in 2026. Give us your bold predictions as well. The spicier, the better. We'll be back next week to look back on the opening round in Australia. Always exciting to see the cars on track in Melbourne. Hopefully we don't get another race washed out. If you enjoyed the show, leave a nice big thumbs up on it and subscribe so you stay up to speed with everything Formula 2. From me, Aaron Harper, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.